Hello, my name is Dr. MarkAlain Dery, Medical Director of Infectious Diseases and Chief Innovation Officer for Access South Louisiana. I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I serve as the co-chair for the ACOI Infectious Diseases Subspecialty Section. Now, you've seen me do these updates for the past few months in conjunction with the leadership of the ACOI. I hope that these messages are helping you to keep up with the latest on COVID-19. I know many of you are in the thick of the fight, and I'd like to thank you all on behalf of all of us who focus daily on infectious diseases, and certainly on behalf of the ACOI. Now, moving together with the ACOI, we will continue to share information as it becomes available, as well as some of the more hopeful progress that we are seeing. So, speaking of the ACOI, are you registered yet for the virtual convention? It's almost here. We are just days away. There will be cool opportunities to interact with each other virtually. So you don't want to miss any networking and time to chat and hang out with some of your ACOI buddies. Plus, with sessions from so many of our members, including this dude right here, you won't want to miss a thing. I can't think of no better way or less stressful way for you to get your CME credits this year. There's actually, wrong way. It's all backwards. There's, sorry. All right, hang on. All right, there's actually up to 61A credits that are available. So I look forward to seeing you. So that's next week, don't forget. All right, so on to the stories. So let's talk about the first reinfection case that we know of. We know that there's something like 22 around the world. There's been a couple that have been published. So since the beginning of the COVID crisis, there's been questions and speculation about the possibilities of reinfection, which has, of course, spurred lots of theories and concerns over immunity and whether individuals are immune once they're infected. Now, there are likely to have been many cases of reinfection in the U.S., but this is the first documented case, and it happened recently when a 25-year-old man in Nevada who had COVID-19 and was confirmed positive during a mid-April community testing event. The gentleman was otherwise healthy, with no underlying chronic health conditions, and was quarantined for 9 days. And he did end up having some mild symptoms, but they went away, and he got better. In May, 2 tests that he took were both negative, but 2 days after his second negative test came back, he reported not feeling well, and in early June was found to be positive for COVID. And this time his symptoms sent him to the hospital for supplemental oxygen due to hypoxia. So it turns out that this new infection, was it a new infection? Was he having symptoms of something else? They found virus, but was this virus just random debris that was positive on a PCR or what have you? No, this was actually a new infection, and this was actually a new strain of virus. And genetic sequencing of the virus showed that the man had been infected with a strain that was different from his first infection, confirming that indeed he had been reinfected. So why was his reinfection worse? In other cases that we've seen, I think we saw one in Hong Kong, and I remember reporting on another one, and I can't remember where it was. But those 2 cases, they were both initially sick, and then when they were reinfected, they had no symptoms. And initially, we were hopeful that maybe reinfection in somebody who was initially sick would lead to no symptoms, and maybe that's the case. Here, this was somebody who had very minimal symptoms, and then when he was reinfected, actually required an admission for oxygen. So again, why was his second infection worse? Was it because the viral load was higher, or did the immune response from the first infection somehow make his reaction worse from the second time around? I don't know. Maybe. I'm not sure. What does this mean for immunity overall? That's the important question. And even more important is who becomes immune and how long does it last? We can say reinfection is possible, but it is rare. And cases of reinfection have been reported in other parts of the world, as I said, including the case in Hong Kong that we talked about, as well as Ecuador. Now, the SARS-CoV-2 virus simply hasn't been around long enough for us to know how long immunity lasts, but other human coronaviruses offer some clues, with some antibodies dropping off after 3 months and some patients experience reinfection within a year. But even if the antibodies do disappear, then the cells that manufacture them, which are called B cells, may in fact still be around, and this is true for T cells as well. Now, believe it or not, B cells for the great 1918 influenza pandemic had been found in people 90 years after that pandemic. And going back to the SARS epidemic in 2002-2003, T cells against that virus actually had been found 17 years later. So that's pretty remarkable. Now, another issue to consider is that just because someone might be protected by their own antibodies, it doesn't mean that they still don't harbor the virus, which means that they likely can pass it on to other individuals. So all in all, reinfection, fortunately, is very rare. We will start seeing stories about these, and it's something that we just need to be kind of aware of. There's a lot to learn more with respect to COVID-19 and immunity, and certainly the implications for vaccinations are pretty profound. I don't think anybody can comment on it right now. There's still a lot more that we need to do, but I think that it's fair just even mentioning it, though. All right, so the other big study that came out this week that I thought was really interesting-ish, because I just want to set the record straight from the media's perspective. But what they did was interesting. The way the media interpreted it, not so much. So, all right, the idea here is how long does the virus stay on fomites, right? How long would it stay on a cloth that I use to clean my lenses for my glasses, or my phone, or what have you, all right? So now we all remember what a hard time we had finding disinfecting wipes at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was because we thought that the SARS-CoV-2 virus could linger on surfaces for long periods of time. We thought fomites may be an issue. Geez, I've been touching everything right now. Hang on a second. I need to be very, very conscious about my hands. At that time we thought fomites were an effective mechanism for transmission of virus. Now we recognize it's probably minimal, if even that. In fact, there's not even one case of fomites that has been contact traced or has been traced to fomites. The couple that there may have been, they never ruled out a respiratory potential for transmission. So what does this all mean? It means that fomites unlikely to be the case. This is overwhelmingly a respiratory disease. But I did want to talk about this. I did want to talk about this study, because they did show that COVID-19 can linger for prolonged periods of time on surfaces, but these were under laboratory conditions. So that requires huge air quotes, okay? So now, it appears that there is some legitimacy to the concern with an Australian research report that came out recently. As I said, and as an infectious disease doctor, I am all for keeping a clean home, office, keeping hands washed, and all that, of course, right? But this study, you have to keep in mind, as I said, was done optimally in a lab environment. But what it did find was that virus can be viable after up to 28 days. That's pretty remarkable. It's a very robust virus. Okay, so what did they do? So they tested the SARS-CoV-2 virus on several surfaces at 20 degrees Celsius, 30 degrees Celsius, and at 40 degrees Celsius, with relative humidity kept about 50%. They looked at stainless steel, glass, vinyl, paper, polymer banknotes, and they also used a cotton cloth. They used a droplet that contained a concentration of virus that was similar to levels found in infected patients, but was dried. But the other thing about it is that they kept it in this this gooey sort of matrix type of, they basically, it's just a blob, and they put the virus inside of there. And so, which is not really quite how the virus is in real life, but neither here nor there, okay? We'll talk about that in a second. Bottom line, The study that was in virology found that it lived on smooth surfaces such as those stainless steel and the glass and the polymer banknotes like euros that when you hold, it's got that slippery surface on it, right? And it held for 28 days when kept at 20 degrees Celsius. But as the room temperature got higher, the level of virus, the length of life of the virus got shorter. Now, the other thing to keep in mind too, that's super important, was that this was done in the dark. No light at all. No UV light, which we know has been shown to kill the virus. So the virus stopped being infectious within 24 hours on some surfaces, like I said, when tested at 40 degrees Celsius. And again, at 30 degrees Celsius, just 3 days, and that was it. So again, my feeling on this is, yes, sanitizing is a great practice. Do it, of course. But unless you live in a cave, which some people think I do, but unless you live in a cave, just know that it's not realistic that those lab conditions will be replicated in real life. So if you hear about the study, the reason why I'm mentioning it today is I want you to be knowledgeable about it so that you can actually tell people, yes, that was a really fascinating story. Yes, we recognize that coronavirus or COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 virus is a very, very robust virus. All of that is true. But the idea that it could live in a lab for 28 days on a little piece of blob in the dark, that just doesn't reflect real life experience. So with that being said, please stay on the lookout for our regular updates. To read more from the sources used in this report, go to the acoi.org/COVID-19. Feels like the YMCA. Together with the ACOI, we will help you have the latest information to help you respond to your patients and stay on top of the crisis. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime at madery@mac.com. Please stay safe. We can do this together. Go to the ACOI conference. Sign up